There's not a procedure that I do today that I did the same 5 years ago. It's all refinement. When you get to the point where you're complacent and it's good enough, you should stop. I've done thousands of procedures. I think my patients think I get good results. But I don't think I've ever done a procedure in my mind that was perfect. I always look at it. I always want to do it better. My results are better, but I'm less satisfied with them because I'm more critical. I'm looking at things that I didn't look at before because I was unaware of them, or it's just ongoing refinement.
And that's what keeps you on your A game, Robert. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Technology of Beauty, where I have the opportunity to interview the movers and shakers of the beauty business. And today is no exception. With us today is Dr. Robert Singer, clearly one of the most famous plastic surgeons in the world, and he is our guest today on the Technology of Beauty. Welcome, Dr. Singer.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Grant, and I'm flattered that you asked me to be on this.
Are you kidding? I am flattered that you're willing to be on it and share all of your experiences. You've been a mentor of mine, and you are clearly an icon when it comes to the aesthetics world. I mean, we could spend the next hour going through all of your honors and awards, but let's just start with the beginning. Where were you born? Where did you go to school? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Robert.
Well, I grew up, well, some people say I never grew up. I just got older in Buffalo, New York, and I went to college there, and I was sort of admitted to medical school at a couple places, Harvard and Columbia, but I applied after 3 years, and they said, we'll take you, but you've got to finish your fourth year. Buffalo said, we'll take you after 3 years with no degree, and they gave me a scholarship. So because of that, and I thought it was going to be easier on my parents, I went to medical school at Buffalo. While I was there, I was involved in a lot of sports. I played hockey in a league in Canada. And then I went to Palo Alto to do my surgical training. Going from Buffalo to Palo Alto, I thought I was another planet. And I actually went to Stanford to become a neurosurgeon. I had no exposure to plastic surgery until I was there. And after I had experience on plastic, it seemed like it was a better fit. But I was drafted out of the middle of my surgical residency. That was during the Vietnamese War, and there was a special physician's draft. So I spent a little time in the Navy, and I spent some time running the emergency room at Balboa Naval Hospital, spent some time rotating on plastic, and then I spent some time on a Westpac cruise and went to Vietnam.
Okay. And then did you come back to Stanford?
I came back to from Vietnam, and I spent a little time doing trauma and emergency room work, and until I went back and finished my surgical residency. I did that in Santa Barbara. They said, we'd happy to have you back at Palo Alto, but we want you to go into cardiac. I said, I've spent enough of my time now in trauma and ICUs. I think I'm going to go into plastic. And after finishing my general surgery residency, I went to Vanderbilt. J.B. Lynch was chair of that, and I spent 2 years there, and that was a spectacular experience at Vanderbilt. It's a great program, tremendous amount of clinical material. I was offered a clinical position there, and I spoke to a couple other people about clinical positions and academic positions. And the best advice I got was from Harvey Zarum, who was out at UCLA running that department. And he said, don't do what your chief wants you to do. Don't do what anybody else wants to do. Do what you really, in your heart, see yourself doing. And that was private practice. And he was right. And it was great advice, and same advice I give to other people. I had some offers to practice in the Bay Area and in Santa Barbara, but I had spent some time in La Jolla as a kid coming out to visit relatives in LA, and my cousins and I went down to La Jolla. We spent some time on the beach, some time surfing, And I said, this is a great community. I think I want to live here. And I started a practice. I was in solo practice, although I shared an office space with a person who was involved in starting the first lipoplasty society, Carson Lewis. We were on the campus of Scripps Memorial Hospital. And then after a few years, I moved into my own suite, my own building, and again on the campus of Scripps. And from there, it's been an interesting ride.
Yes, it has. Now, I happen to know that you are firmly committed to aesthetic education and patient safety. You've talked about this my entire career. I've heard you talk about it. Would you share with our listeners some of the things you've done in the way of patient education, physician education to maximize the outcomes and the safety for the patients?
Well, I've been a member of a number of organizations. I was president of the California Society, I was chair of the board of trustees of ASPS, but my primary love and focus has been aesthetic surgery, and I was president of the Aesthetic Society. And during that time, I started a number of things. I started the Electronic Commission, which essentially was the basis for the videos and where we're at now with what we're doing.
Yep.
And I started the ultrasound lipo task force, that device and technology that Michele Zocchi had started in Italy. And we required all of the members who were going to utilize that to go through training. From there, it became obvious to me that why should we go through this with each new technology and new development? So that was the start of the innovative technology and Hot Topics. So I started Hot Topics, which I'm very proud of because that's the real buzz at the meeting.
Yep.
And with that, looking at developments for the Aesthetic Society, said we really need to bring in younger members earlier. So I started the candidate program so people could be involved before they became members. And then I also looked and said, well, we need to be looking at innovative procedures. We need to look at technology. We need to look at research, but we need to also be looking at what's valid and what's not. So I started ASERF.
And tell everybody what ASERF stands for, please.
Aesthetic Society Educational Research Foundation. I actually started that with Simon Fredericks, who was one of the original founders of the Aesthetic Society, unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, an iconic plastic surgeon in Houston. And now the ASERF is doing tremendous amount of things with directed research. It's doing things with BII, breast implant illness. So we've come a long way, but we've got a long way yet to go. And it takes innovative leaders, and we have a number of those. Along the lines of safety, safety has always been a priority. And as it should be for every plastic surgeon, it should be the key.
Yep.
I've been operating in an accredited facility since the early 80s when quadruple ASF was formed. I became president of Quad A, and I also started the Quad A Educational Foundation and actually brought together people from the American College of Surgeons, the nursing organizations, and the other two accrediting organizations, Joint Commission and AAAHC. And we had a global summit to try to come up with some reasonable, sensible guidelines that could cross all the organizations for safety for any ambulatory surgery. Having done some of those things, I was asked to testify at Congress in the beginning of the 80s, about safety and actually urged them to have standardized guidelines of safety for ambulatory surgery and truth in advertising. Well, there was a lot of show of that in Congress. There was a lot of media coverage. And unfortunately, like many things in Congress, it came to naught. But I didn't lose that thrust of continuing to emphasize that. One of the key things in my mind for progress is data. Data is king. Helped Quad A develop their data program. Actually, another plastic surgeon who's in Los Angeles, Jeff Keys, helped develop the program that gave tremendous amount of initial data, which has been used in a number of books about safety. It's also was very significant in information to the FDA. They've revised and they've gone through another development as far as a different program for getting data. But the key thing is data that can give us information about untoward outcomes, and we can look at why, and that gives us a chance to improve, which we should always be improving. The thing I'm proud of with Quad A, and I'm not on the board of Quad A any longer, but I'm still emotionally very supportive of it. Quad A really has led with getting data out about safety, much more so than any other entity. And now I've been involved with a task force to bring safety internationally through the International Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons, ISAPS, and we formed an alliance. I don't want to say a partnership. I'm not sure what the term is going to be between Quadruple ASF and ISAPS. One of the goals is to get ISAPS to require ultimately its members to operate only in licensed or accredited facilities. Looking back, one of the things I'm proudest of is I brought the boards of the Aesthetic Society and ASPS to the table and got them to require that all of their members would operate only in accredited and licensed facilities. There was some pushback about that. There was some pushback at the time from ASPS, and they were concerned about losing members. And I said, really, do you want a member who would not be operating in an accredited facility? And they bought into it. ASAPS bought into it very early. And that's been the standard since then for those organizations. And I hope to see that now internationally. We have training programs for inspectors internationally in all of the countries. We just did a Zoom internationally in all the time zones with regard to that. And I think that will be a significant move forward in elevating safety worldwide. If ISAPS brings all its members to do that, it will be the only specialty in the world that requires its members to operate only in licensed and accredited facilities. And you know, there's a number of things about safety, and it's a matter of training. It's a matter of operating in the appropriate facility. It's a matter of patient selectivity, and it's a matter of following all the reasonable regulations and guidelines. And along that line, today we're at a new place in history because of COVID. Although I will tell you, I did the first webinar on COVID for plastic surgeons through the Aesthetic Society. We did that last May. Normally you have 30, 40 people on a webinar. First one, we had 1,600 surgeons on it. So Jamil Ahmad is one of the younger, brighter leaders in plastic surgery, and he's in Toronto, and where my dad's family grew up. And before that webinar, I was talking to him about it because the Educational Commission of the Aesthetic Society put that on, and he's a co-chair of that. So he said, this is really unusual to go through this, Robert. And he said, none of us have been through it. What was it like for you during the Spanish flu of 1918? I said, let me tell you, Jamil, that one wasn't bad. Let me tell you what it was when I went through the Black Plague. And I said, and by the way, this is why we closed the northern border to Canadians. So, but what we did in the Aesthetic Society, and the other organizations have also done that, and Quad A has done that, but ASAC's really led with developing the COVID task force, developing all the reasonable regulations and standards that you should do once practice was reopened after elective procedures were closed, and instituting those steps, which we still follow today, has made the practice of plastic surgery and elective surgery and aesthetic surgery safer and better. Patients know now that offices like that follow those guidelines, they'll be safe. In fact, we have good data that was published, and actually it was published by Cosmetasure from information about accredited facilities and versus hospitals of safety, and it showed that accredited facilities actually had a safer record, lower rate of infection, and fewer problems than in hospitals. Now, there are many good hospitals. I'm aligned with Scripps Memorial in the hospital. In La Jolla, it's excellent, but there are a lot of patients today who come and say, I don't want to go to the hospital for a procedure. Can you do it in your facilities? And the answer is yes, with good full-time anesthesiologist and following all the safety guidelines. So that has always been a passion, and that I hope will always remain a passion for me. And I hope that to stimulate others to follow, and as I have in those footsteps.
So you've used the term Quad A and Quad ASF a few times. Could you explain to everybody what Quad A stands for?
Yeah, it's the American Association of Accredited Ambulatory Surgical Facilities.
Excellent. Excellent. So that's an accreditation.
It's easier to say Quad ASF than
I know.
mouthful. But
I know, but there's some people.
Job.
Yeah, there's some people that don't know what it means. So yeah. I'm glad that you did that. And it's an accreditation agency, and we require that people have an accredited OR. That's one of the accreditation facilities. You mentioned two others.
Right. There are two others that are recognized in the States that are national. And we've given input in a number of state legislatures with regard to guidelines. It's unfortunate still only 27 states require accreditation of ambulatory surgical facilities. So you go to a lot of states and anybody can operate. There are no guidelines who can do procedures. And there's no oversight of the facility, which to me is criminal. It's just absurd.
Well, I would agree. Yep. Okay, moving along. I know that you and your lovely wife have big hearts, and I know you have philanthropic activities. Could you share them with us?
Well, let me share this because this is my better 2/3. I don't know if you can see this.
Yes, I can. Judith. Gorgeous.
She's a dynamo. We're involved in a lot in the community and internationally. And one of the things that we believe in is giving back. In fact, I really never, I had a website, so I guess I marketed, but I really didn't advertise, didn't do those other things in the past. To me, the external marketing, and I didn't do it for the marketing, I did because it was the right thing to do and it was good for the community, was involvement in the community. We've been involved in the San Diego Global Zoo, which in the Safari Park, and actually Judith was president of the San Diego Zoo Foundation. We were involved in building the downtown public library, and Judith was, again, it seems like Judith's head of all of these things. She was chair of the Library Foundation Board and raised $187 million to get that built, combination of public-private funding. We're also involved in a lot of smaller charities that nobody hears about. She was chair of the Commission of Arts and Culture for San Diego. We're involved in the symphony. She's on that foundation board. We're involved with the La Jolla Playhouse. But we're involved in a lot of things for literacy. I ran a task force think tank for the San Diego Council on Literacy. It's astounding how many people across the country and in this community are functionally illiterate. And this gives them an opportunity to learn, to be able to read. We travel. Fortunately, we've been able to travel a lot, ongoing learning experiences. And everywhere we travel, the key things that I hear from parents, especially in third world countries, the key thing they want is the ability to educate their kids for a better life. So we're involved with that. Certainly, one of our huge passions is animal welfare and wilderness preservation. Judith was also very involved, and so was I, with the San Diego Humane Society in building a new facility a number of years ago with some key members in the community. And that was one of the first places to have a no-kill policy. And so we're proud of that. But if you look at the shining light of Africa today, it's Rwanda. Even though it went through the genocide, it was horrendous. They've pretty much eliminated crime there. And they have a lot of foreign investment coming in, and they have that because of tourism. Tourism exists because of the mountain gorillas.
Yep.
The mountain gorillas exist because of Dian Fossey, and we're very involved in the Dian Fossey Global Foundation. And actually, Judith has been president of that. And we're building a huge new campus in Rwanda for education. We train Rwandan students, now 400 of them, to become scientists with preservation, conservation, and that's a huge undertaking. And we've had a lot of support. There's been support from people, key people across the world, and some foundations. So we're very proud of that. It's one of the few endangered species that's actually increasing a little bit. And it's fortunate that none of those mountain gorillas, and there are no mountain gorillas in captivity. They're only in the Varengo Mountains. None of them have gotten COVID, and they have, are very similar genetics. So the fear of transmission to them could wipe out all of the mountain gorillas. It's interesting that the San Diego Safari Park, 3 of the gorillas, those are mountain gorillas, not mountain, they're either lowland or Grauer gorillas. 3 of those developed COVID. They were treated with monoclonal antibodies, and they all got better. Okay. So, that's great success.
Yes. That's fascinating.
The question will be, will industry develop vaccines for them as well as for us? And hopefully they will, because that danger exists for a lot of species out there.
I wonder if the messenger RNA approach could be used with the gorillas. If we had
possibly. The monoclonal antibodies that were developed for the gorillas were a tiny bit different than the ones for humans, but it was very effective. And especially, there was an older gorilla who had some other comorbidities, and fortunately, he got better.
Good. Excellent.
So we're proud of that.
So you've been in this business, the aesthetics business, for over 40 years, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I started private practice in 1976. I'm sure a lot of people who are on this webinar on this Zoom or listening weren't born then. And I've seen tremendous changes and developments during that time.
And that's just where I wanted to go with this, because you have the advantage of this long period of time. You've been at the forefront the entire time. You can look retrospectively. I'd like you to look prospectively and give me a feel for what you think we're going to see in the next, say, 3, 5, and 10 years in this specialty.
Well, the developments I've seen is a migration of a lot of surgery out of hospitals into private facilities. We've already talked about that. The other things are the non-surgical that I've seen develop. Certainly something near and dear to your heart.
Absolutely.
The non-surgical fat removal, fillers, Botox, none of those existed when I started practice. Anesthesia has gotten better. Propofol didn't exist. And a lot of the anesthetic agents, which are safer and better with monitored anesthesia, didn't exist. Techniques have improved. We've learned a lot more about anatomy of certain areas, like the anatomy of the face for facelifts. Rhinoplasties used to be just removing tissue, and they were often over-operated, overdone, and a classic nose job. Now it's a matter of really better analysis, understanding the anatomy, taking away where it's excessive, adding where it's deficient, both in faces and facelifts and noses. We've learned a lot more about breast surgery. We have a lot more data. When I started, implants were sort of in their infancy. They had just started developing saline implants, and we've seen newer generations of implants that are safer, better techniques, better understanding of things that we never thought about, biofilms, and how to have a safer procedure with a lower risk of infection, lower risk of capsular contraction. All of those things are relatively new. The whole area of body contouring, some of that really started by a Brazilian, Ivo Patangue, and a few others. That's become a tremendous field now. We also didn't have things like gastric bypass and gastric sleeves and massive weight loss patients, which opened a whole new area of plastic surgery. But we also have seen advances in general plastic surgery, not just aesthetics, better understanding of wound healing, better treatments for scars, better understanding of inflammatory process in wound healing. So there have been tremendous developments. Also, COVID, if there's a silver lining, it's the fact that it has changed education. It's changed how we will do things in the future by virtue of the fact we're doing this on a Zoom meeting, and we can reach people that we wouldn't have been able to reach without them getting on a plane and flying. That's changed. That will continue to change. Also, there's far better educational forums. The symposia that the Aesthetic Society puts on, the regional societies like the California Society, those have gotten better. And with more input from more diverse members. And we're seeing that our patients are much more diverse. Many years ago, it was really procedure for a small group of people who could afford it. Today, aesthetic surgery is available to everyone. The procedures have gotten more reasonable. There's options to do them as an outpatient, not staying in a hospital for 7 to 10 days after a facelift. Not only, they're also safer, and we see the individuals from every ethnic group now coming in for surgery. You also see the burgeoning of aesthetic surgery, outside of the country. You see the growth of it in every country. The aesthetic ISAPS has, I think, 102 or 106 different countries that are involved with it. But you see a tremendous growth in Australia. You see tremendous growth in countries in Asia, and certainly in the Middle East and in in Europe. You're also seeing that in North Africa and South Africa. So all of those things are because of increased communication, more media exposure. Unfortunately, with social media, there's no filter, so a lot of it's not very valid. It used to be patients came in and in a consultation, you started at 0 and then you educated and you brought up to here. Now you have to start at -10 with the misinformation and bring them up to 0 before you can provide all the other things. So there's a lot of good things about social media and the web, but there's also some real negatives about that. So those are some of the things that I've seen. We've some of the other changes, some of the task forces. I was involved with the task force that developed the guidelines for safety for liposuction. If you look back, there were a lot of high-profile cases of disasters by individuals who weren't fully trained or weren't trained at all in facilities that had no oversight and with no guidelines of how much or attention to the physiology of the patient. We came up with a guideline that electively it should be less than 5,000 cc's removed unless they're going to be kept overnight in an appropriate facility like a hospital. And we did that arbitrarily. We made the right decision and it made it much safer, but there wasn't real good data to do that. That was just gut reaction from a lot of surgeons who had gone through general surgery and understood about trauma, physiology, shock. That helped. We had the task force to look at Brazilian butt lifts. And with the data that came out, that forced a lot of people to look at the research, look at anatomy, look at making it safer and better, which I think that task force achieved that. There are some surgeons who are great advocates of that. There's some surgeons who still have some questions about it, but we should have question about every procedure about making it safer and better. There's not a procedure that I do today that I did the same 5 years ago. It's all refinement. When you get to the point where you're complacent and it's good enough, you should stop. I've done thousands of procedures. I think my patients think I get good results. But I don't think I've ever done a procedure in my mind that was perfect. I always look at it. I always want to do it better. My results are better, but I'm less satisfied with them because I'm more critical. I'm looking at things that I didn't look at before because I was unaware of them, or it's just ongoing refinement.
And that's what keeps you on your A game, Robert.
Well, I think that's what we all should be doing. To me, if you're standing in place, you're going backwards because other people are moving forward. So it's all a matter of, I respect the past, I honor it, but I'm not married to the past. I'm always looking to the future. I certainly have been involved in strategic planning for a whole bunch of surgical organizations, hospitals, philanthropic entities in the community. So I'm always looking at how can we improve things? Where do we go next? What's the next thing? And I was privileged. I was asked to be part of the faculty and a resource for a group called YPO CEO, and that's Young Presidents Organization. CEO is obvious, and WPO, World Presidents Organizations. And I was at one of their international retreats. I spoke after Jack Welch and before Queen Rania. But I learned something from Jack Welch, and that was he talked about strategic planning. And he said, in the past, we used to look strategic planning 10 years. And now we look at what do we need to do? He said 5 years. And now it's down to a year because the window closes very quickly. So we need to look at ongoing improving our organizations, improving our surgery, improving our technology. And we can't do this alone. It's a matter, in my mind, of a great relationship and partnership with industry. They can't survive without us. We can't survive without them. Those are where the new ideas come from, and with input from good surgeons. One of the things that recognizing that I did for the Aesthetic Society and strategic planning is I created the mentality of CEO to CEO. Having their CEOs and having our leaders get together at a retreat at strategic planning and decide what are the common grounds. Certainly there are differences of goals between plastic surgical organizations and industry, as there should be, but there's a lot of similarities of goals, and those are the things that are important to work on together, and that's made plastic surgery better.
Yes.
It's also made industry better.
That's right.
And I know you've believed in that.
Yes.
You've been very involved in industry and have those relationships. And whether it's in plastic surgery, whether it's with patients, whether it's in life, it's all about relationships.
Yes, sir.
It's all about forging relationships.
I agree. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for spending the time with us today and letting us get to know Dr. Robert Singer that much better. I learned some more things about you, Robert. So thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today on the Technology of Beauty, where we have a chance to get to know the movers and shakers of the aesthetics business and the aesthetics industry. Take care, Robert.